Hi and welcome to this week's Retvlog, where of course all the talk at the moment is on Battle for Azeroth, because basically the beta's launching. Okay, they're calling it alpha again this time. Really? Anyway, whatever. Now there's two different points of view you get at this point every time. Every time alpha stroke beta, whatever you want to call it, is going open. You know, in other words, the people that were testing before NDAs are lifted, you know, streamers are going to be going in, theory crafters are going to be going in. Then there's 2 points of view that you always get. One is the sky is falling. That is the predominant view at the moment. Of course, lots of people, you can see it on the Paladin Discord. There's a special channel which has now been opened up to the public, so to speak, for discussing Battle for Azeroth, Retribution. And because, of course, all we see when we're looking at the new talent, so to speak, even though there's no new talents, maybe one, and you're looking at the abilities, and it's all nerfs, and people are going, oh, this is terrible, it's all awful. That one you need to guard against at this moment in time, because I've said this before, classes are the last thing to be worked on. There's other elements of the game in there, the classes and all that sort of stuff is the last thing to be worked on, because Blizzard do need the feedback on that. And the other thing to note is they're not all done at the same time. You know, so don't treat how Retribution Paladin is at the moment on the BFA Alpha, if we're going to have to call it that, as what Blizzard intend to go live with. No, they don't. This isn't going live for a long time, a very long time. They haven't got round to doing anything with Retribution yet. That's why it is. Yes, okay, they've changed some things, so that means they've done something. But they haven't really been spending any serious amount of time on it. That actually presents an opportunity, but I'll go over that in a little while. Now, someone was asking me, I was discussing this in the stream yesterday, should there be teams for each individual class so that classes are all worked out at the same time because you've got a dedicated team working for them? No, absolutely not. It sounds like a great idea, doesn't it? But in practice, it will not work. Blizzard, it's pretty clear from the outside, has a particular culture whereby a small number of individuals carry a disproportionate amount of influence. It's pretty clear about that. The problem then becomes, if you set up class development teams, individual teams for each class, the ones who are the most influential are going to get the coolest stuff for their class. Even let's imagine that it all ends up being balanced fairly well, which is hugely doubtful. Even then, you'll still end up with some classes getting the coolest stuff, especially with their philosophy. Remember, their philosophy is very much, we want unique abilities. If someone, and they used AoE stuns as an example, so I'll go with that, you know. So let's imagine this influential person really lobbies hard and gets for their class, whatever it happens to be, a very powerful defensive on a short cooldown. And it's like, oh no, your classes can't have that because we've got it and it's got to be unique. And then they grab the AoE stun. Well, we've got the AoE stun, so you lot can't have it. And they lobby for all basically the coolest stuff, and in particular the best utility in a raid. That would be a disaster. It'd be great for the people playing the classes, for the ones that were really good at that, not so good for everyone else. But the problem was it would completely unbalance everything, because you'd have people wanting to play that class and not enough people wanting to play the class with the crap abilities, let's face it. Now, then there's the other one. The other point of view people are saying is don't panic. Just like I said on this, don't panic. And they'll say don't panic all the way to oblivion, because there is an extreme version of that. So what some people will be saying on the forums is, what you're talking about, it's very early. In fact, it's not technically even open yet. It sort of is open because we can data mine stuff, but the people who are going to be in the first wave haven't had their invites yet. So they'll be saying, look, there's loads of time to go. There's loads of time to go. Don't sweat it. And then what will happen, it'll be a few months down the line, and some of the problems that are quite clear problems still won't be fixed. They'll be going, it's fine, they just haven't got around to it yet, it's all cool. Then you'll get to a point where it's a couple of months before launch. They announced the launch date has been announced, and you know they're going, yeah, it's fine, it's not, it's still beta, it's beta. And then it'll get to just about launch, and it's fine, it's okay, there'll be a last push. And then it'll go to live, and they'll go, well, they'll deal with it at some point. And they'll just keep saying don't panic to oblivion. And we mustn't do that either. It's better to be focused on, first of all, what are the key problems are. Now, don't just panic. Don't just look at, say, oh, the cooldown on Blessing of Freedom's gone up, it's been nerfed, or this has been nerfed. You know, Blade of Wrath has been nerfed, the procs per minute have been nerfed. And just go, oh, we want all this back. Focus on what are the actual key problems, not so much balancing issue, but key fundamental issues, because balancing will carry on throughout the expansion. What you need to sort out before launch are the core abilities and talents, the basics of the class. Are they right? Now, and communicate early is the key thing. Now, here's the thing. There are some things that are, going to be good about the class that we want to retain, and there are some things that are not so good about the class that we want removing, and there are some things that are proposed that are not great either. Some of the things, if you just argue for their removal, if it's part of their philosophy that we have them, there's no point. What you're better off doing is changing it. But there are some things that are not part of that philosophy, and you need to sort of talk early. Getting on forums where you see a post that you agree with, not only replying and adding your own thoughts, but upvoting that one. Very, very important. So, are there things to worry about? Yes, there are a few things to worry about. This is the but. There are a few things that it is worth bearing in mind, and the earlier you start the debate, the better. Now, when I said before about the fact that they haven't really been working on Retribution Paladin at the moment presents an opportunity for when they do. The debate has to be full force. It has to be shown to Blizzard, like, these are the issues we have with the class, so that when they do commit resource time, and I am not anticipating a lot of resources spent on Ret Paladins. They've sort of said there's not going to be a lot of massive changes to most specs, but there are some specs that they named some time ago as the ones that they really want to tackle. Ret Paladins were not one of them. They sort of think it's sort of okay. So they're not going to spend much time on it. So when they come around to spend that time, in their minds, they've got to have some of the issues that we do want dealing with. It's not a lot of them. It's not a lot, but it's a few. Because in Legion, it was completely the opposite way around. In Legion, the specs that they wanted to make the massive changes to, Ret Paladins was one of those. That's why we got it very early on in Legion Alpha. This time around, it's not going to be worked on for a while. So what are some things to worry about? Well, there's a new thing, which is the auras, the class auras. Now, I've already talked before about, it's not even a simple case of which ones get the better ones. Inevitably, some classes' auras will be better than others. Some will be more missable. And that's the big fear. I'm not hugely impressed with the one we've got, but that's neither here nor there. That is not the key issue. So on the Paladin Discord yesterday, one of the mods, Earth, was talking about the fact that Demon Hunters, to get a Demon Hunter aura, assuming you want one of each aura in your raid, you're going to need to take, in most cases, a Havoc Demon Hunter, a DPS Demon Hunter. The reason is because they only have two roles, tank and DPS. And if you don't have a Demon Hunter tank, and most don't, then you've definitely got to take a DPS Demon Hunter. Now, I will go one further with that, because it's actually even more serious than that. There are 3 classes that have DPS and tanking roles for that class. And they're all melee. So you've got Demon Hunters, already discussed that. So you've got Death Knights, they can be a tank or a DPS. So if you don't have a Blood DK in your main roster, then you need to take a DPS DK to get that aura. And Warrior, same thing. Now let's imagine you're a guild, much as the one I'm in at the moment, where you've got a Brewmaster Monk and a Guardian Druid as your 2 main tanks. That means you have got to take, in order to get each aura into your raid, you have absolutely got to take 1 DPS Death Knight at least, 1 DPS Warrior at least, 1 DPS Demon Hunter at least, and 1 DPS Rogue at least. At the very least, you've got to take those. If you don't have a Mistweaver Monk, and you don't have a Guardian Druid, then potentially Windwalker as well. But, at least those 4 you'd be saying. There's very likely, depending on your tank combination of your guild, there's very likely to be 4 classes that you need to take for the melee. And that's what we're competing with, melee spots. Because we know how it is. It'll not change in BFA. There will be plenty of fights where it really doesn't matter what your balance of melee and ranged is. And there will also be fights where there might even be the odd fight, just like there's been in Legion, where actually you want a lot of melee. Great, like Gul'dan. But we all know there's also going to be fights where melee are poison. And yeah, people will say, yeah, you can do it like Coven. We just killed Mythic Coven last week, and we did it with like 5 melee. This week we're going to have to do it with 6. We've lost it. We're going to have a terrible time. But we did it with 5. Sure, no problem. Okay, people have done it with 5 way before us. And people will still carry on doing it with 5. You can do it. But you make it a lot easier if you don't. Simple as that. You make it a hell of a lot easier if you don't. And the same will happen in BFA. So melee spots for certain fights will be highly prized. And when you've got to take 4, and it doesn't matter necessarily how good those players, as long as they're not really bad players to the point where they're a liability, then they're guaranteed, their spots are guaranteed. And that's assuming, by the way, that they do deal with utility, because utility is obviously, it used to be something Paladins were really good at. It was our class fantasy, and then it all changed. Obviously, we know that rogue utility has traditionally, not just in Legion, but traditionally, going all the way back to vanilla, been really powerful. Now, they have had what is apparent change in philosophy, according to that blog, where they're going to be liaising with the encounter team. Now, I'm very much in support of that. That's the obvious thing. I've talked about that before. Particularly in terms of Sargeras, I said it probably in a previous Retvlog, but I've certainly done videos on it, where I was saying because they keep saying things like, when we say, well, we don't have any useful utility on that fight, and they'll say, oh, you've got great utility, you've got, lay on hands and blessing of protection and blessing of freedom. And you're like saying, yeah, but they almost never come in useful. They are almost never used in a raid encounter. So they're worthless. Whereas you look at something like Rogues, again, the extreme example, Cloak of Shadows, Feint, they come in useful on every fight. 100% of fights, those abilities are useful. And, so it's the value of them in encounters. Now, I always kept saying what they need to do is to have that liaison between the class design team and the encounter design team. That's now what they say they're going to do. But as I was explaining in my last video during the week, the problem is, whose responsibility is it? Because it's all right saying they're going to liaise, but the bottom line is the class design team will be wanting to make sure that all the utility abilities they give to those classes are useful in raids, but the encounter design team need to ensure that they design cool encounters with cool mechanics that are balanced as well, that work properly. And there's going to be a conflict of interest. So someone has to have responsibility for ensuring that that philosophy is acted out, instead of just having it as an aspirational thing. If they don't, and that's a question I would love to ask Blizzard, who is going to have the responsibility? Because if they don't assign someone who has the authority and the responsibility to ensure that, there is going to be that conflict of interest at times that stops it being the case. But anyway, there we go. But yeah, so the issue with the auras is a serious one. Now, here's the thing. I would, if I was planning this, if I was, Ian Hazakostas, I would straight away be thinking about that and going, we can't have these auras. It's just going to be bad for the game for that reason. I would just cut them out completely. They're not going to. It's a big thing that they want to bring back. And some people will be quite supportive of that, by the way. So there's no point in arguing that that shouldn't be the case. And then you think to yourself, well, okay, what about rest? So you might not have a protection paladin. You've got to bear in mind that we have holy paladins. Holy paladins are always strong. So even if you don't have a protection paladin in your guild, you will have a holy paladin, and you will take holy paladins along. And that's always been the problem with Rets for the last couple of expansions, that everything that we have as utility, so do holy paladins. And they have more. They have the same things we have, but more. I mean, all right, we've got greater blessing of wisdom. Wow. But I know healers go mad for it, like cats and catnip, but still, for everyone else, it's like, oh, big deal. And, but yeah, so it is an issue. So the best thing to do that is just to express the concerns. Express the concerns and try and steer it towards it not being a colossal problem, because you don't want to be sat there where you're listening to people going, okay, who do we need to take for this fight? Oh, well, we've got to take so-and-so because we need the DK aura. We've got to take so-and-so because we need the warrior aura. We've got to take so-and-so because we need the demon hunter. We need the rogue aura. Oh, we've got holy paladins. We don't need the paladin aura, so we'll see if there's a spot left. We don't want to be in that situation. Then there's the Retribution passive. Now, this is the other side of the coin. This is definitely something that can be done about. I would very much urge people to make posts about this, and upvote posts where you see people talking about this. We basically need the Retribution passive removing or heavily modifying. There is the suggestion that Blizzard had that the Retribution passive was just a bit of fun and it wasn't going to be taken into account with balancing, has clearly been shown to be nonsense. Clearly nonsense. And this is the thing I don't get about the Retribution passive. They were so devoid of reality The first instance of the Retribution passive, when I got into the Legion Alpha, it actually gave 100% damage boost. Not 20%, 100%. Who can think that 100% damage boost for 20 seconds isn't way overpowered? The fact that, and okay, I know it's before testing, sure, but at least put in a sensible number. 100%, even at 20%, it's overpowered. Because the problem is, if you have a stupid raid where you get a few people die, but it doesn't stop you killing the boss, you're going to do loads of damage. When people stop dying, you suddenly do loads less damage. So you have this situation where, you know, as people are dying, your damage looks really good, but as people stop dying, it just goes right down. You know, you look at the top passes, they've always got Retribution procs on the go. And you know, particularly during wings, obviously that makes a big effect as well, or a particularly crucial part of the fight. Obviously, if it's a fight where you can't afford to have people die, then, you know, when you actually get round to killing it, that means your damage is going to be bad. Where you can afford a few people to die on Tauren High Command, that sort of thing, then you have a situation where the difference between good passes for those who are interested and bad passes are just, what did people die? Did people die at the right time? Did people die within 40 yards of you? Because people can die and not being 40 yards of you. That's a bit of a problem as well. So that needs to be removed. Now, Blizzard, if they're still going to stick to their class fantasy line, and we see this as class fantasy, they at least need to remove the damage component. Remember, Retribution passive, it's easy to forget, has two components to it. One, it boosts our damage by 20%, but it also boosts our, damage reduction by 30%. Well, keep the last bit. Get rid of the damage component, keep the damage reduction. It's still procs, it's still a thing, and it's just what it is. There we go, we get to keep it. But we must ask them to get rid of it, because it does affect our balancing. It means that our damage is not what it should be when people are not dying, because they cannot afford to let our damage become overpowered when people do die. And there are fights when you can afford to have people die, or where people are even encouraged to die, like Argus. And we would do too much damage then, so they have to rein it in. So they are taking it into account when they're tuning our damage, and that must stop. That really must stop. So, in terms of coming back to utility as well, I mean, the jury has to be out on that one, because we don't still yet know what their ultimate plans are, because they sort of give the impression they're rethinking utility. But as I say, I have fears that they won't, because their core philosophy remains the same. But it is interesting to note when they were defining utility that they mentioned mitigation, but they didn't mention mobility, because that's always the one that they were talking about before Legion as well, where they were sort of saying, well, basically mobility is the same as defensives, and in some cases it can be. You know, it's like you can either choose to, like eradication, for example, on the first boss, Grothy Willbreaker. So we can use Blessing and Protection on ourselves there, one of the few times when you can use Blessing and Protection in a raid encounter, because it's physical, and stay in DPS the boss. Or someone who's faster could get out quickly and then get back in quickly. Say a warrior with like Heroic Leap out, charge back in. In that situation, sure, you know, you can compensate one or the other. But there are also times where you have to move out of something, your defences won't cover it, either because they're not strong enough or because they have too long a cooldown for you to use it. So, I mean, again, how do you compare, say, our Divine Shield on a 5-minute cooldown with a movement speed on a 30-second cooldown? Because the movement speed can be used for every instance of a particular event. Your defensive could be used like once per 5. And that's another thing to bear in mind. Of course, they're wanting to get rid of the treat death, so the divine intervention they want gone, which basically means we are going to be stuck with that, you know, long bubble time. I mean, sure, they're also increasing the cooldown, it appears, of Cloak of Shadows for rogues. And putting a cooldown on Feint, I think. And it's also worth bearing that in mind as well. When you look at how we are at the moment, you just see it's all nerfs, it's all nerfs. It's also worth bearing in mind you can't just look at one class in isolation. You might need to look at other classes as well, because they might have an overall philosophy of tuning down, say, defensives, or tuning down mobility, or tuning down this or that. And we know there's going to be a lot of flux when it comes to utility as well. And as I say, we need to walk this line between running around like a chicken with its head cut off going the sky is falling and be fine. Just let them work on it. They haven't got round, they haven't finished it yet, it's still beta. We need to avoid both those points of view and walk the line. And I would just say the focus should be what are the key issues and just keep discussing them. Keep discussing them on the forums. If you don't have access to the Battle for Azeroth forums, and of course, until you get an invite in there, you won't, then you discuss it on the official forums. And you keep discussing it on the official forums. And you keep upvoting people who are discussing it on the official forums. And you keep making sure that it is an issue. And that's the best thing you can do. I mean, you don't complain on like Discord or MMO Champion or any of the other official forums, even though Blizzard will also watch those. You do it on the official forums. Don't go mad, don't go calling developers stupid or anything like that, but you just keep the issues, and there's only a few of them, but you keep them front and center in their minds so that when they do get around to spending some time on the Retribution Paladin, which may not be a lot, that they have thought about these issues in advance and hopefully get rid of the Retribution passive, hopefully think carefully about the auras, and hopefully think carefully about the utility. Because I think those are the three key areas. There is also a change in philosophy when it comes to talents again, but again, we can't really do anything about that until we see what they want to do with that. I am rolling my eyes at what they've said about that, but again, that's an issue for later. Now, in terms of where this is going to likely to go, I can't plan for certain at the moment. I do not know whether I will get into the alpha testing. I do not know when I would get in if I did get in. So it's one of these things. I don't know whether future videos I'll be doing on this topic will be from me looking in and just trying to comment on what other people are doing, or whether I can test things out for myself and pull some numbers out myself and have a look at what's going on myself, much like I was able to do in the Legion alpha. But hopefully I'll be able to update that for next week. Also, I'm not just going to suddenly turn over these Retvlogs each week to Battle for Azeroth, because Legion's still going. I will still be doing some of these videos based on Legion as well. However, now that the beta has been announced, alpha, whatever, I did say before that I would be announcing the next live Q&A. That will now be next Saturday. I can't remember when next Saturday is. I think it's the 3rd of February. So the 3rd of February, I'll put the correct date up somewhere. I'll have looked it up by the time I edit this. And it's going to be 7 PM UK time. And that will mean a slightly shorter afternoon stream. And that's when we can discuss all this. We'll still be able to discuss Legion things. The typical format for those who may not have come to one of these before, I do it on my Twitch channel, and we just talk about anything Retribution Paladin based. And like usually lasts, and it's a bit shorter than my Azeroth review on Tuesdays. It tends to last more like an hour and a half, something like that. We'll get involved in that. We'll have a little talk about Battle for Azeroth, about Legion, and whatever else it happens to be. And that will be next Saturday, yeah. So that should be... Well, they're always interested, but that might be a particularly interesting one. So thanks very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to give it a like. Subscribe if this is the first time to my channel. Check out my other Retribution Paladin playlist if you are new to the channel. Share it with other people who might be interested. And until next time, see you later.